Today, let's explore the Möbius strip. The Möbius strip was independently discovered by the German mathematicians August Ferdinand Möbius and Johann Benedict Listing in 1858. Moira Chas, a mathematician at Stony Brook University, has verified that Gauss was aware of this one-sided surface even earlier. If you take a strip of paper, give it a half twist, and then join the ends together, you'll create a Möbius strip. Unlike many modern mathematical subjects, it's not abstract or perplexing. Instead, it's very concrete and intuitive. So much so that even a child can easily make a Möbius strip model with a strip of paper.
Is there something peculiar about this strip?
The Möbius strip may look simple, but it leads us to many fascinating conclusions. First, the Möbius strip is a classic example of a non-orientable space in topology. It appears then that the Möbius strip has only one side. To put it visually, if a person were to walk on a Möbius strip, they would end up on the opposite side when returning to their starting point without ever crossing an edge. At that moment, they would become their own mirror image. In essence, although you return to the start, you are no longer the same.
It sounds like me, waging from my trauma.
And this relates to our previous discussions about reincarnation. The natural physics behind it is quite magical. For instance, if we establish a three-dimensional coordinate system on Earth and launch something using Newton's cannon along an axis, ideally, you would return to your original point. If you leap along the vertical axis under certain conditions, gravity would also bring you back to the same spot. As for time, a dimension that continually progresses, whether it eventually loops back is a topic for another day. The Möbius strip has become an important concept in mathematics, art, and even urban legends. The symbol for infinity in mathematics is said to be derived from the Möbius strip because a person could theoretically walk on it forever. Möbius is also considered a pioneer of topology. He first clarified the nature of topology in his 1863 publication, The Theory of Elementary Relations, where he considered two figures that correspond point for point with adjacent points corresponding to adjacent points, suggesting the study of such connected figures. In the 160 years since, topology has flourished and has become one of the main branches of mathematics. The Möbius strip itself continues to reveal its extraordinary properties, many of which remain mysterious to this day. And related to the Möbius strip are concepts like the famous Penrose triangle and Penrose stairs. If you divide a straight line into 3 equal parts, keep the middle part stationary and fold the sides at 90 degrees forward and upward, you create the Penrose triangle. Drawn on a plane, it exhibits properties similar to the Möbius strip, endlessly looping back on itself.
I know it! It looks like the Monument Valley I played before.
All right, my gaming girl. Monument Valley was indeed inspired by the Penrose stairs. The Penrose triangle was first created by the Swedish artist Oscar Reuterswärd in 1934. British mathematician Roger Penrose and his father Lionel Penrose designed and popularized it, and it was published in the British Journal of Psychology in February 1958 as the purest form of impossibility. We've mentioned Roger Penrose before. He won the 2020 Nobel Prize in Physics, but is also a controversial philosopher due to his research into quantum consciousness. Here's a two-dimensional illustration of the Penrose stairs. Imagine someone standing on these steps. If they walk clockwise, all the steps ahead are downward, and they will pass through 4 90-degree turns before returning to the starting point. If they walk counterclockwise, all the steps ahead are upward, but they will still make 4 90-degree turns. In the end, you come back to where you started.
Do such stairs exist in real life?
Good question. They do not exist in normal three-dimensional space. But let me tell you a story. It happened one day in April 2013 in Rochester, New York, at an old private university called the Rochester Institute of Technology. This university is the second oldest private technical university in the United States, with nearly 200 years of history, and is renowned both in the US and globally. On April 30th, 2013, a master's student named Michael Lacanalau posted a video on YouTube. At the beginning, two hosts, a man and a woman wearing uniform orange t-shirts with RIT's abbreviation, introduced some upcoming school events. Soon after, the conversation shifted to the stairs, and they mentioned the term Escherian stairwell.
What is an Escherian stairwell?
Escher was a Dutch artist famous for drawing the Penrose stairs. The video implied that there's a mysterious stairwell at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where, legend has it, no matter whether you go upstairs or downstairs, you always end up back at the starting point. It sounds unbelievable that such a place could exist in the world, and yet, it's supposedly right there at their own school. The show's crew, full of doubts, went to the RIT campus and interviewed a few students randomly. When they heard the strange name, Escherian stairwell, most shook their heads. However, a few students had heard of it. The next scene cut to this legendary Escherian stairwell. One of the hosts demonstrated by walking up the stairs from the left side, and then a miraculous moment occurred. He had clearly gone up, but now he was coming up from below. He brought over an Asian student named Rosie, who said it was her first time at this place. She was completely skeptical of the rumors about the stairwell. So, the host let her walk up alone while he waited at the bottom. As she ascended, followed closely by a cameraman, she reached the top only to astonishingly encounter the host again. Of course, we'll leave the truth of this story for our viewers to explore.
Kay, you are sneaky. Is this kind of like a homework assignment?
If I gave away all the answers, where would the fun be? The Möbius strip is about the infinite cycles of two-dimensional beings perfectly demonstrated in three-dimensional space. Next, let's talk about the Klein bottle. The Klein bottle was proposed by the German mathematician Felix Klein. He imagined a surface with only one side, like the Möbius strip, but closed like a sphere. The Klein bottle is a mathematical product of imagination and logical thinking, realizable in four-dimensional space, but impossible in our three-dimensional world, and beyond our three-dimensional being's intuitive understanding. Like the Möbius strip, the Klein bottle is closed and two-dimensional, but due to the increased dimensionality, it's even more magical. If there were creatures that could fly inside a Klein bottle, they could emerge from the enclosed bottle without crossing its boundary. All the Klein bottles we see appear to have the neck inserted into the body of the bottle, and some might think that with such advanced technology today, we can't even make a simple bottle. But this isn't about technological advancement. It's about the spatial dimension we humans inhabit. Einstein built on the theory of three-dimensional space to propose four-dimensional space. However, our reality is three-dimensional, and the Klein bottle is a model from four-dimensional space. For such models that transcend our three-dimensional world, the Klein bottle is much more complex than it appears. Thus, in our three-dimensional space, even the most skilled craftsman can only create it to intersect with itself. Much like even the most skilled artist must depict three-dimensional objects on paper as intersecting lines. Interestingly, if you slice a Klein bottle along its symmetry line, you'll get two Möbius strips. Conversely, if you glue together the edges of two Möbius strips, you'll form a Klein bottle. Of course, these operations need to be performed in four-dimensional space. Otherwise, their continuity would be compromised. Next, let's talk about mirror symmetry. As we've mentioned earlier with examples like the Möbius strip and the Klein bottle, it's possible on such surfaces to move an object in such a way that it becomes its own mirror image.
It's a bit like the mirror world in Doraemon.
Mirror symmetry is abundant in our everyday lives. For example, our hands are mirror images of each other, yet cannot be superimposed. This leads us to a very important concept known as chirality. Imagine if our space was like a Möbius strip or a Klein bottle. If we traveled a long enough distance, upon returning to our original spot, we would have become our own mirror image. Left hand becomes right hand, left brain becomes right brain, even the heart shifts to the right. These are noticeable changes, but there are many changes that are harder to detect, which brings us to chirality. Chirality is a fundamental property in nature, observed from vast cosmic nebulae to roadside plants. Because of chirality, molecules with the same structure can exhibit different configurations. In pharmacology, drugs with different configurations often exhibit different effects. Among the 20 amino acids that make up proteins, all but glycine are left-handed, and our body's enzymes need to recognize chirality to function on proteins. If someone made a mirror symmetry journey and returned to Earth, they would be unable to eat or digest food here because their enzymes would now only work on right-handed proteins. This difference extends to other organic molecules like DNA. Due to chirality, a person returning from such a journey would be reproductively isolated from normal humans. They would essentially be a different species, like an alien from another world. Yet, they only made a long journey back to the start. We've talked about reproductive isolation in previous videos, and interested viewers can revisit that and compare it to the reproductive isolation related to the Möbius strip.
I feel like our universe might be a giant Penrose staircase or a Klein bottle.
These two types of cycles are actually quite different, primarily due to chirality. Historically, this difference has led to major disasters. A very famous example is the thalidomide tragedy, one of the greatest disasters in modern medical history, caused by the different effects of two configurations of the same drug. Around 1960, many countries saw a surge in births of babies with limb deformities. Epidemiological studies later found a correlation between the rates of these birth defects and the sales of thalidomide, marketed as Contergan. First synthesized by the Swiss company Tiba in 1953 and later marketed in Europe by the West German company Grünenthal, it entered Japan soon after. It was promoted as a pregnancy sickness medication with no side effects and quickly became popular in Europe, Japan, Africa, Australia, and Latin America. The consequences were devastating. Starting in 1958, there were unexplained spikes in miscarriages and stillbirths, and tens of thousands of women gave birth to severely deformed monsters. These babies were born with missing or malformed limbs, and some even had non-functional internal organs like the brain. The birth of these deformed infants caused widespread panic in hospitals. Many were abandoned by their parents at hospitals, and others were tragically left to freeze to death in hospital morgues. Even those who survived faced a lifetime of physical disabilities, chronic pain, early aging, arthritis, and coronary heart disease, making their lives much more difficult. Despite decades of research into thalidomide's teratogenic effects, it took nearly 60 years to unravel this mystery. It turns out thalidomide has two optical isomers with opposite chirality. The R form is a safe and harmless sedative, while the S form is teratogenic, affecting limb development in the fetus during the first 3 months of pregnancy, resulting in babies with seal-like limbs. Mirror images might look similar to their originals, but they can lead to vastly different outcomes, much like the mirror world in Doraemon you mentioned.
I have been thinking, maybe today's me might actually be the mirror image of me before the accident.
Hey, you! Don't play games. I know you're watching on the other side of the screen. That's right, freak. It behooves you nothing to ignore me. Join the lab and become Labman 000X today. Today's keyword is